I'm assuming that you can all see my screen now, and I just wanted to land on what you will first do to access eNVD. So this page is the welcome page to MyMLA, which is the main way that you'll be able to access LPA and then eNVD. I won't take you through the actual login section, but what I will do is if you enter a direct eNVD link, so like that, you will be taken to the LPA login page. So this is the other page that you might see to access eNVD. Both pages will land you into the LPA homepage. As you can see on your screen here, we've got a bunch of information about your LPA accreditation, and then we've also got some options at the top. Okay, you should be able to follow my cursor now with the little red dot on your screen. And I'm sorry, I'm going to look over to the screen that I have in front of me, but I hope that you're concentrating on the screen and hopefully not me by now. So please follow along. So at the top of your LPA home screen, you've got a couple of options. One of them in the middle is eNVD. If you select that option, that will take you through to the eNVD web application, which is what you can see on your screen here now. Okay, so this screen is the home page for the eNVD application. It's called your consignments list screen. And there's a couple of things that I want to direct you to on this screen. First of all, you'll land in here, and if you have previously used eNVD, you'll see that there are some eNVDs here. If you haven't previously used eNVD, there won't be any consignments listed there, but it will just have a message encouraging you to start your first consignment. You'll notice up the top here that I'm on the consignments tab of this page, and you'll also notice that there's a few other tabs across the top here. If you've previously used any historical systems of ours, namely the eDec system, you'll be able to find those historical consignments under that section there. And of course, if you do have any trouble or you want to go back to LPA, you can access help and return to the LPA Service Centre from the top. Over on the right-hand side, you should have your login information here, and this tells you what account you're logged into. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, so about the middle, we've got a feedback tab here. And as I mentioned, we're constantly monitoring feedback and improving the system based on the information that you give us about your experience. So please tell us about what you're liking and what you're not liking. You can access that feedback button at any point while you're using eNVD, so it doesn't just belong to that screen. Another thing I'll draw your attention to is this little icon down the bottom here, this little megaphone. In here, it tells you what we've released with eNVD, so you can access information here about what's coming or what's new, and then you can have a look at different articles, and we'll particularly be putting information there about new features and things that we're delivering that should be improving your experience. Okay, so let's get started, and I'll just take you up to the top right-hand side of the screen, and this green button says create new consignment. Okay, so in this screen here, it's asking you whether you'd like to start from scratch or to use an existing template. And for the purposes of the demonstration, I'll just start from scratch, and then I'll demonstrate how to use a template after that. Okay, so the first screen that you'll enter when you start a new consignment is the movement information screen. And this information is representative of the left-hand side of a regular NVD, which in part A, which is where the livestock are coming from, which is predefined. So you should see your pick and your account information just here at the top of the screen. And then it's where they're going to, which is a bit further down. So in this particular case, I am going to keep this button up the top here ticked because I am also the owner of the livestock. But if, for example, I was in an inducement situation, the livestock might be coming from my pick, but if they're owned by someone else, I'm able to search for that someone else if they are a producer themselves, or I can enter the details manually here. And you'll notice that it's optional to put a pick in for the owner, and that's consistent with our paper copy documents. If I don't want to do that, I can select cancel, and I can tick the box again that says that I am the owner of the livestock that are moving. If the details that are pre-populated in the consignment aren't correct, you have the option to edit them here. The only thing you can't edit is the PIC that they come from, and that's consistent with the hard copy LPA NVD and the way that we print the PIC on the consignment booklet for you. Again, you can fill in, you can change the information to suit what's happening in this consignment, and you would select save. In this instance, I'll select cancel because all the information's correct. Now comes the tricky part, and a lot of people, we have had a lot of feedback about this next step, and that is where are the livestock being transported to? So that is the destination. For the purposes of tonight, I'm going to search for my colleague George because we have a test account under his name. But let's just pretend Mr. G. Basher is an abattoir and I'm going from a producer property to an abattoir. So as you would have seen, I searched in the PIC register and selected the most appropriate selection for me. If I decide that those details aren't correct, again, I can edit the details in here. So for example, we are missing an address. It's important to have an address. So we'll put in the one at the top of my list, save those details, and you'll see there that that address now is populated and it will populate in the final NVD. Alternatively, if I decide that's not where those livestock are going or I've made the wrong selection, I can select a different PIC. You also will have had the option to originally put in the details manually. So if I'm not sure or I can't find the correct PIC in the search, I can enter the details manually, just like I would write them into a document. So put in the name, put in the address, and all of those kinds of things. Again, for the purposes of tonight, I will find our George Basher abattoir again in the PIC search. Now, if I'm consigning to an abattoir, but I know that I'm part of a certain quality assurance program, or if I know that a particular livestock buyer or agent is handling the consignment, I can untick this box and also enter the agent details. So if, for example, I know that the agent doesn't have their own PIC, then I would use the enter details manually. So I might say agent A is going to look after this. You may or may not know their address. I'm going to keep them in New South Wales for the purposes of this consignment. And you may or may not know whether they have a PIC or exactly what their postcode is, but fill in as much information as you can and then save that details. So what you're seeing on your screen here is that they're being transported to the abattoir, our Mr. G. Basher abattoir, but they're being consigned to the agent or the livestock buyer that would handle the transaction. And that's how it's going to come out on the paper copies of the eNVD if you choose to print. Okay, so then we'll select a date down the bottom here. And you don't have to select a time, but if you would like to, and particularly for the likes of the MSA vendor declaration, it's always good to pick a time. So we'll pick a time after now, so this evening at 10 p.m. And I would suggest that you always just have a bit of a scroll back up, particularly my screen that you're seeing here tonight is quite big, but obviously yours might be quite small. So just make sure that you're scrolling back up and checking the information that you've entered at each step. And I'm going to select next. The next screen is to select the species. And it's something that we would like to be able to pre-fill based on your profile information. But for now, we're going to stick with asking you what you would like to do, and particularly for those producers that have joined us tonight that are multi-species. For the purposes of this evening, I'm going to stick with cattle because the majority of the people who are registered and online with us tonight are cattle producers. So this account that I'm logged into, it has MSA accreditation, it has National Feedlot Scheme accreditation scheme, and it also has the option to have health declarations. It is also registered with the EU. So I'm currently seeing the full gamut of things that I can select for this consignment. For the purposes of tonight, I'll just select a few. So I'm going to select a regular NVD, and then I'm going to select an MSA form. And we'll go with those two forms tonight. But obviously, if you wanted to do a health declaration, or if you were an accredited feedlot, you can select as many of these forms as you need. And what this will do is make sure that the information that's across these 4 forms now, yes, 4 forms is consistent. So the next screen in front of you is what we call our wizard or stepper. And this is where you will start actually answering questions and filling in information about the livestock that are a part of this consignment. So this first screen is your livestock description. It replaces the table that you'll see on an NVD. If you select to add a livestock description, you'll be able to add information just as you would in the table on a regular hard copy documentation. Tonight I won't draw the brand, but you can draw the brand if you would like to. So this option enables you to draw a brand or a signature or whatever you might like to use. Or you can describe it like you usually would in a table. I'm going to just describe it for the purposes of tonight. I'm also going to say that the livestock that I'm adding have NLIS tags and not rumen devices. And then at the bottom of this pop-out screen, I just select add. Now what's happened here is that I've essentially added one line, so one sector of my livestock as part of a description. I can change, if I've made a mistake, I can remove it. I can also update those details with the change button at that point in time. And you'll notice down here that my total head count is 10 and my total number of electronic tags is 10 as well. If then I want to have another line or another group of livestock, again, I can add a different group by selecting the add button. These might be steers this time. And again, I won't draw the brand. And I will say that they all have NLIS tags. So here you can see part 1 and part 2, which are representative of 2 different lines that we're used to seeing on the table. Again, you have the flexibility to change and remove. And at the bottom, you'll see that my total head count has increased to 25, and so has my total electronic ear count. And that should round out your livestock description section. So you will then select next.
So just before we get into the history section there, you've run us through the movement, forms and livestock sections. I'm just conscious, we're working through a cattle example, but we do have some people that are sheep only and goat only online tonight. Is there any differences in what you've stepped us through so far in terms of what a sheep or a goat example might include?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, on sheep and lamb or goat consignments, you would have seen different sex options. You would have had the ability to add mixed sex instead of selecting bull, steer or heifer. So we tailor the responses to the species that you have previously selected, but there would be no change to the experience. So the screens will still look the same. The way that we ask the questions will still be the same.
Excellent, great. Just thought we'd clarify that for our non-cattle people online. We're getting some great questions coming through, so I'm going to let the ISC team continue working our way through those while you run us through the rest of the sections.
Thanks, Dee. Okay, so as you can see on your screen, now we're up to a different section of the consignment. We are at the history section. And these sections here are now a combination of all of the different questions that would be history related from all of the forms that you've selected to enter. So what I mean by that is this question at the top here is a regular question from the LPA NVD, and I will answer it as such. So I'll go no, and I've owned them for 2 to 6 months. However, this question, are all the animals in this lot milk-fed dealers? This comes from the MSA vendor declaration. So as you can see, we've combined the questions, so you only have to answer them once, and so that they're logically arranged into these sections at the top. If you're wondering where these particular questions come from, you can always select the help button over to the right-hand side against each question, and that'll give you an indication of which form these questions are related to if you can't tell otherwise. Okay, so I've moved now on to the food safety section. Again, we've combined the questions in this section. So some of them you'll recognise from the NVD, some of them you may recognise from other forms. And this is particularly important when we combine a health declaration. There tends to be a lot more questions in the history and chemical and treatment section. So So I'll go through now and answer the questions as if I was doing the consignment. And you'll recognise these questions, as I mentioned, from a regular LPA NVD. When I've answered all of the questions in each section, you'll see that there's a green tick at the top, which means that we've saved that information about this consignment. Okay, so once I've filled out all of my questions, I'm then taken to the declaration section. And the declaration should be pre-filled with the information that's come from your account. So you will be given a full name, an address that's registered, and then in the middle of your screen here, you can choose to upload a signature file, or you can choose to sign the declaration. And for the purposes of tonight, I'll show you how to sign. So if you hit that sign declaration, there's a piece in the middle here that comes up, it says signature. In this box that's outlined, you can do your signature using the mouse. Obviously, if you're on a mobile device, you can use your finger. The box should cater for fat fingers, so you shouldn't have any trouble there. The date will automatically populate as today's date, because that is the date that you've just selected to sign. But if you are doing a declaration for the future, and we can make them for up to 28 days in advance in eNVD, you can predate or backdate as required. Consistent with hard copies, we do require a phone number. No screenshotting would be appreciated. So I'll just enter in a legitimate email here so that our system works. And then you'll be ticking that you do declare that you have read and understood and agree to the terms that are below. And we will list the terms for each of the declarations that you have said that you wanted to be a part of the consignment. So in my example here, I've got NVD and MSA, and you will see the declaration text there. By ticking that, you are declaring those particular terms. Because I've got an MSA deck in my consignment, I'm required to put an MSA registration number. And if the MSA registration number of the owner is different, you also have the ability to enter it here. Finally, you can add any additional documentation if you're part of a proprietary program or want to attach anything else as evidence or as part of your declaration. And there is the additional information section down the bottom. Finally, you can hit next. And of course, live demonstration, there's always some sort of error. At this point, we'll go back to the consignment and I will show you how to work around this particular issue. And also I'll show you a bunch of other things that we can do with your consignment. So as you can see, the consignment's in draft mode, and that's okay for now. I'll run through the submit and print in a minute. What I'm going to do is show you what you can do with that consignment. If, for example, you realise something is wrong or you want to start again, but you want to have the same information that you previously had. So over here on the right-hand side of our consignments, we've got a couple of options to do with this consignment that I've just created. One of them is update, because it's still in draft mode. One that's duplicate, and one is create a template. And finally, we can delete that consignment if we want. So to begin with tonight, I'm going to show you that we can duplicate it. Now it takes you back to the start of the consignment, but as you'll see that all the information is pre-filled in that consignment. So all it's a matter of doing is checking that you want the same information. So this speeds up the consignment significantly. You will have to make the declaration again. So you will have to sign, because this is a new consignment. And you will have to enter in information again. Okay, so it's likely that some of the information I've put in, particularly around the test accounts, is creating that error, but we'll just ignore it for now. What I'll do is go back to the consignments. If I wanted to come in and I really wanted to use eNVD, so access NVDs, but I didn't want to go through all of the steps, I wanted to just access the hard copy, for example, I can create a new consignment, create from scratch. I can put in some basic details. About the consignment. So I'll do the same thing as what I did before. So now I'm going a little bit faster. You can see that I've got the same consignment details. And when I get to this page, all I can do is go up to the top, and I'm sorry, I do have to move my cursors and bits and pieces that I've got going on here, and submit and print. Now what that's done is I haven't filled out any of the information, but I can choose to go back and update the consignment. I can also choose to print and access the forms. So what you'll now see on your screen is the NVD, and if I scroll down, the MSA vendor declaration. And as you can see, the information that I haven't filled out is left blank for you to fill out on the hard copy. Now you can choose, now I'm in Google Chrome, but obviously whatever browser you use, you will have the option to print. My option to print is over here at the top right of the screen, and I can also choose to download those forms. So if, for example, you have completed all of your information and your consignment is clear and it's correct and complete, you can download that copy of these PDFs and you can email that off to whomever you might like. So for example, we often find that that goes to agents, or you can print the form and fill out the majority of the information on a hard copy. But remember that if you do print out the form, you will need to print multiple copies, because you need to have one for yourself that's finished and complete, one for the transporter and one for the receiver, same as the triplicate copy that you get when you order a book. Okay, so going back to our consignments list, you'll now see that I've got one submitted, one draft. For the purposes, I will use this submitted consignment to demonstrate the other functionality that we have. Otherwise, I think we will run into our little friendly error again. So from here, my options have changed. I can now update the consignment. I can view those documents that we just viewed. I can duplicate the consignment, which I just demonstrated to you, or I can create a new template. So if I create a new template, I can add a name, something that I'll remember. So for example, if it's a particular type of livestock, or if it's a particular place that you're sending them, you can create that template and it'll come up in your list of templates. And I'll get you to look at the top of the screen now, and we're now on the templates section of the web application. From here, it'll show you what species and what forms are included in the template and where it's from and to. You'll then be able to go and create a new consignment using the template, edit it or delete it. So if I go back to my original journey that I took you through, where we created a new consignment, now you'll see that I have the option to use that test webinar template. And what that would do is save me putting in that information. So if I select that, you'll notice that all of the information in here again is pre-filled. I just have to make sure that it's correct, and then it'll take me straight through to the section where I left off. And again, I can submit and print, or I can leave this consignment and come back to it later in draft form. Okay, and finally, excuse me, if you decide that you don't need that consignment anymore, and for the purposes of auditing, you don't want that consignment there because it hasn't actually happened, or if you just make a mistake and you want to have another go, you can always delete the consignments. So it'll ask you whether you're sure, and then you can delete that draft or submitted consignment. Okay. That's a basic first run through. So that's our eNVD 101 that I've run through, and basic features of the eNVD. I'm sure you've had lots of questions throughout, but I'm hoping that we have answered a bunch of them on the journey.